This is one of the greatest eras ever for pace bowling. The 1950s was the last decade that had a lower average. That was a period where teams struggled to make runs or take wickets. Now we get plenty of fast runs and even quicker wickets. And it's not just this decade. It actually started earlier, around 2017, 2018. The last 7 years have been incredible for quick bowling. Only 1 year has had batters go at more than 30 against them. There is not another single 12 months before 2018 where the average was below that. We just went from a great batting era to an incredible bowling one with basically no gap within a generation. There are many reasons. Teams now play for results in a way that we have never seen before. Only 3 tests were drawn in 2024. Sometimes the rain isn't even enough to deny a result, like in Kimber. Runs are being scored so much quicker, which means batters are also getting out more frequently. It's kind of chaos. Not to mention that the Kookaburra ball has been juiced up. Flat batting wickets are almost non-existent anymore. The Jukes ball is used in 2 different places. Teams take risks for World Championship points, and the T20 Bazballification of the 5-day game has changed pretty much everything. This means that Dale Steyn was on his own as a great in the previous generation. And in the last decade, we've had late career Jimmy Anderson and 3 new players. At the moment, Pat Cummins is fighting to finish as a top 3 seamer for Australia. Rabada has the best strike rate in history, and Bumrah is the only bowler with 200 wickets at an average of less than 20. And interestingly enough, all of them got their 200th wicket in their 44th match, though at different averages. Cummins was 21.5, Rabada 23.07, and of course 19.42 for Bumrah. And it's probably unfair to compare anyone to Bumrah at the moment, regardless of the format. He's not just the best bowler, but clearly the best cricketer around. However, our question is not just on current form. As of now, which fast bowler has had the best test career? Bumrah, Rabada, or Pat Cummins? Cricket media used to be pretty simple. Find your favourite newspaper, head to Cricinfo, and maybe a blog you like. Now just finding the best stories and writing is a huge challenge. You already have a job. You just want to read about cricket. Well, that is what the best of cricket is currently doing. They go out daily to find the newest cricket coverage and the best stories from any publication in the world. And when they can't discover what they want, they also hire some of the best writers to produce their own great stories. You can get the best of cricket via their website or on WhatsApp. They find cricket's best stories and give them to you every day. When we look at balls per match, we see 4 New Zealand seamers at the top in terms of usage, followed by Mohamed Abbas and Josh Hazlewood. Cummins comes in 7th, and he bowls more deliveries per test than Bumrah and Rabada. That's not a big surprise. Bumrah is bowling a lot on Asian wickets, so isn't used a lot, and Rabada is playing incredibly short test matches. And in South Africa, Rabada has always played in very short test matches. But each of them bowl more than 30 overs per match for their teams. Cummins is not quite a stock bowler, but since becoming captain, he has lent towards that more than being just a strike bowler. I find this one very interesting. All 3 are more effective against right-handers and left-handers, but Bumrah outperforms Rabada and Cummins a long way against the lefties, averaging nearly 20 against them, while the other 2 are close at 26. And I think this is really the major difference between them as bowlers. They are all great against right-handers, but the other 2 can't keep it up against the southpaws. Bumrah is almost identical. His greatness cannot be slowed down by what side of the bat you stand on. I think there is a huge difference in the way they get their wickets. Since 2015, only Mohamed Abbas has attacked the stumps to take more wickets than Bumrah. And only Alzarri Joseph and Neil Wagner get fewer LBWs and bowled than Cummins. Rabada gets about a 4th of his wickets in this manner, but it's still about half of what Bumrah does. And think about it with Cummins. He only ever bowls people with like the top corner of the stump. It's a completely different method than someone like Bumrah. And even compared to the other Indian seamers, Bumrah's mark is quite high. Bumrah bowls full and at the stumps. However, he does get a lot of keeper catches off his bowling. On the other hand, Cummins bowls a lot shorter and is much better at the tuck down the leg side, aiming at the batter's armpit. He bowls at that position a lot, trying to get the court down the leg side, but also wickets through horizontal bat shots. Of course, that makes a lot more sense if you're bowling in Australia. And Rabada's lengths are different again, especially compared to the other 2, because against right-handers, Rabada is better shorter, and that is his normal mode. And to lefties, he has more success bowling fuller. Now, not only does Rabada have the best strike rate overall, but also in each individual shot type. The gap is most noticeable in rotating, followed by defensive shots. But however, there is not a lot to separate them when it comes to attacking shots. Bumrah is the best guy on this list against the top 6. But all 3 of these bowlers are very good against specialist bats. Rabada and Bumrah are almost identical when it comes to the tail, whereas Cummins struggles a little bit more, perhaps because he just doesn't bowl at the stumps as much. When you look at where they are at their best, I think this is what shows just how much better they are than other bowlers. You can see that they're under the global average here quite comfortably at the start. But that is the period at which they're probably closest to the global average, right? Whereas later on with the old ball, Bumrah and Rabada especially completely dominate. But it's Rabada who has the best numbers between overs 40 to 60. And what is perhaps most incredible here is that Bumrah's average is actually at its absolute lowest between over 60 to 80. Now, part of this might be that a lot of wickets are falling these days and you're not bowling to top order players anymore. And perhaps reverse swing is happening a little bit more with the SG ball than we're seeing with Bumrah or Dukes. But those numbers are insane. And to be honest, they're also insane for Rabada. Whereas you look at Cummins here, he's actually really equal all the way through. He's just always better than everyone else, but he doesn't really have the peaks that the other 2 guys have. If you are going to face Jasprit Bumrah, the best time is in the first innings. That probably makes sense because that is when you expect the bounce to be at its most consistent, and so you can at least defend some of the balls on the stumps. As it gets slightly more inconsistent throughout the game, good luck. By the time you get to the second innings, though, Bumrah has just completely changed what he does, and good luck trying to face him at all. In the third innings, basically all 3 of these guys are unplayable, and it's pretty similar in the fourth innings as well. Except for weirdly, Cummins goes up a little bit. And so far you will have seen average, and you'll see that Rabada has probably pretty consistently been better than Cummins all the way through. But match factor is a way that we would look at these things more typically, and you can see here that Bumrah's match ratio is 1.34. He's still distance away from Glenn McGrath, who's got the best record of all time when it comes to that. But he's 34% better than the seamers in the games that he plays. Behind that is Pat Cummins, who is 32%. So even though Bumrah's average is a lot better than Cummins, when you actually factor in the wickets that they both bowled on, there isn't much between their records. I was a bit surprised by this. Rabada's match factor might be the most interesting here, as it's basically half of what Cummins is. Like, he's 16% better than the bowlers in his games. If you have a look at some of the other bowlers on this list, you'll see that Mackay and Tini has a slightly better record. And I don't think anyone would have thought that coming in. But let's be honest, anyone on this list is great. We're just nitpicking here. But it does allow us to understand a little bit more about the pitches that they were bowling on. And it is also worth remembering that Rabada is a bit behind them. However, it must be said, because the South Africa tend to play on so many extreme pitches at home, it probably reduces the gap between Rabada and some of the other seamers. However, Dale Steyn is second on this list. So the previously great South African seamer didn't have that. And it's worth remembering that as we go to the next graphic. This is strike rate factor. We know that Rabada has the best strike rate of all time. We also know that the vast majority of bowlers with the best strike rate of all time have come from South Africa in the last 20 or 25 years, right? That can't be a coincidence. So this is strike rate factor. And there's no doubt Rabada is still great here. He's 23% better than the other pacers in his game. So he's still striking quicker than Bumrah or Cummins. However, you can see just how many bowlers are ahead of him on this list now. And that includes 3 other South African bowlers of his era: Dale Steyn, Alan Donald, and Mackay and Tini. So it puts Rabada a little bit more into perspective. He's still undoubtedly a great strike bowler, but this probably suggests he's not the greatest strike bowler of all time. And when you factor in the pitches that Cummins and Bumrah are on, these guys are all strike bowlers and all great at what they do. But there's another thing that actually goes against him here. Both Cummins and Bumrah are much better suited to games where the bowling average is more than 30. Essentially, flat wickets, right? Bumrah is 43% better in these games, and Cummins is 36% better in these games. When the average is over 30, Rabada is only 4% better. So basically what we're saying is when there is nothing in the wicket, Cummins and Bumrah are still absolute goats. But Rabada comes back to be just above average. And as you might expect, at least over the first part of his career, Cummins has played in a lot more high-scoring games than Bumrah has. So Cummins is very well tested on flat wickets, and the other 2 less so. But where you take your wickets also matters. Cummins outperforms the other pacers in his matches everywhere in the world apart from Sri Lanka, which is a very small sample size of 2 games. But he has a very good record in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India. So he has performed well in Asia. At home, he has an extremely dominant record, just the 44% better than everyone else, and he's up 41% in South Africa. However, in England and New Zealand, he comes back and he's just above average there. Bumrah has a match factor of less than 1 only in New Zealand. Again, though, it's only from 2 matches. His record of 66% in Australia, 96% in India, and 156% in the West Indies is obscene. He's 7% better in England and almost exactly par in South Africa. Both of them are extremely good across all conditions though. Rabada, apart from his dominant home record of being 27% better than the other quicks, has a brilliant record in Bangladesh. He was just over there and was really good again. But also Sri Lanka and the West Indies. He's also about par in New Zealand. However, the other places outperform him in Australia, England, India, and Pakistan. I think it's fair to say with Rabada, he's not quite as well rounded as the other two. But we wanted to have a look at how their peaks compare with the other greatest fast bowlers in the games. Among the three, Cummins actually has the best record, a match factor of 36% for a 200 wicket streak, while Bumrah isn't too far behind at 33% better. Rabada is back at 18%. Again, still absolutely great. But you can see that there have been a lot of bowlers a lot better on this metric. In fact, at one stage, through 200 wickets, McGrath was 91% better than the other bowlers in his game. And you can also see Imran Khan, Sean Pollock, Richard Hadlee, Dale Steyn, Malcolm Marshall, and Jimmy Anderson all over 50% at times. This brings us back to the fact that these three great bowlers that we are looking at the moment have all benefited from bowler-friendly wickets, the wobble ball, the kookaburra being juiced up, more dukes being available. All these things are happening at the moment. Instead of looking at 200 wickets, if you look at the best 40 innings streak, Bumrah is 62% better than other bowlers, Cummins 47%, and Rabada 33%. Imran Khan has the best numbers on this, but also Glenn McGrath and Sean Pollock are right up there as well. And on both of those last two metrics, we have Rabada towards the end. I think that shows you that he hasn't had the same kind of peak that Cummins and Bumrah have been able to put together. That doesn't mean that he's not in the same league, just they have clumped together huge periods of time when no one can play them, whereas Rabada can be really good, then average, and really good, then average, then great, then average again. And the best way of showing that, of course, is rolling test averages. This shows us that, as we talked about recently, Cummins actually went through a bit of a poor run of form. He actually averaged 35 over a 10-test period. But of course, since then, he's gone back to being absolutely great again. And Rabada was around 33 for his 44th match. So both of those guys have had periods where they weren't bowling as good or weren't being anywhere near as dominant. Whereas Bumrah has never had a 10-test period where he's averaged more than 30. And just to tell you how wild these guys have been in the last 10 tests each, Cummins has been averaging 21. Bumrah has been averaging 17. And Rabada's mark is currently 15.64. That is just stupid. But I think it's probably more fair to look at these things on match factor. And what's interesting here is after 15 games, they were all around the same. But that is when Cummins completely found another gear. Weirdly, this is when Bumrah started to struggle the most. And at the 30-match period, Rabada and Cummins exchanged places briefly before Cummins went to a near Bumrah level. And Rabada was more around the replacement zone. Now, Cummins has struggled and Rabada has completely taken over. But look at Bumrah in all of this. His peak is higher than either. And if he keeps this up for the Tour of England and let's say another home summer, he will be almost untouchable. Bumrah is currently 74% better than the seamers in his games. Rabada is 45% better and Cummins is 19% better. But at his best, Bumrah had a match factor of 2.12, meaning he was 112% better than the other seamers in his games. Yes, I'm using the outside voice. There's no other voice for this. Of course, when we're looking at greatness, we're also looking at longevity. And Cummins and Rabada have played a lot more matches than Bumrah so far, and they have also outstanding numbers. And when we are looking at match factor at the moment, we are probably looking at Bumrah, where his brain and his body are both absolutely matched perfectly with each other. If we are talking overall cricketers, it's worth remembering that Rabada and Cummins can outbat him. Although, of course, Bumrah has scored the most runs in an over. Cummins has also captained Australia in 32 tests, compared to just 2 for Bumrah. I think having Bumrah out on the field is usually a boost for tactics, of course. And Rabada is perhaps the best fielder of the three, although Cummins is pretty good as well. Until their careers are actually over, it's hard to make a choice. But if you want a current 1, 2, 3 based on form, it's Bumrah 1, Rabada 2, and then Cummins. But if you were looking at all time, I think it would be Bumrah 1, Cummins 2, and Rabada 3. Here's the thing though. I know people love ranking things online, and I understand that. But I don't think it matters all that much. The incredible thing about this is, over the last couple of weeks, we have been able to watch all 3 of these guys bowling pretty much at the same time. In fact, if you live in the right time zone, you can literally turn off from Cummins or Bumrah and then watch Rabada bowl some days. 3 all-time greats in one day over 5 consecutive days. Except it never actually goes to 5 consecutive days because these guys take wickets way too fast for that. It took God and the demon to build international cricket, but don't tell Johnny Best that. 1882, Australia had played one test in England against the god W.G. Grace, and they sucked. So they were playing him again, and it was a tough wicket. But England was in front, so Australia was desperate for a third innings lead. At number 8 was young all-rounder Sammy Jones. After a routine single, he walks down to do some gardening on the pitch. Grace whips off the bails and appeals. The ball wasn't dead, Jones was run out. The Australians were furious. In fact, some of the English players were also furious. But what Grace said went, and the umpires had already given it. Next in was Fred Spofforth. He was known as the demon fast bowler. He was furious, and he let England know exactly what was coming next, which was maiden. There's 12 maidens. I can't count them all. England only needed 85 to win. W.G. Grace made 32. England only 77. That was the test where the Ashes began. Buy my book, Overthrowing Cricket's Empire, on Amazon today.